we have heard from many of the doctors that it is in fact completely brutal at the moment. In fact, the doctor said to me yesterday that if he knew this was what medicine would be, he wouldn't have done medicine, one of the doctors in the front line. So your advice is go to work, come home, keep your things as minimal as possible, and follow the non-pharmaceutical advice and guidelines that have been in place.
Absolutely, absolutely, sure.
And then, Doc, if you could just help us. We hear this word variant used a lot, and then we heard about this variant and that variant, and now it's alpha, gamma. Can you briefly just clear the mist about that stuff?
Okay, very briefly, this particular virus, it's called RNA virus. RNA, as remember, is the messenger in the genetic code. These RNA viruses, it's a long chain of RNA. When I say long, I mean you can hardly visualize under electron microscopes. Everything's very relative. But because it's a long RNA, it does tend to mutate. In other words, it tends to change, and it'll keep changing because the virus obviously hasn't got a brain, but under selective pressure, it'll try to evade the immune response. The immune response of people that have recovered from infection, or what we try to induce with a vaccine. So it is constantly mutating, it's constantly changing. And as it does so, it sets up a new line, what we call a lineage. And these lines are variants. They are variants, as the name implies, they're a variation because of mutation from the original parental or ancestral strain. So as we are vaccinating people, as people are recovering from infection, there is the pressure on the virus to change itself so the virus can escape this immune response. And it causes variants. There are variants throughout the world. The first variant which was actually picked up in the United Kingdom. And this variant, its characteristics are that it is very much more contagious, very much more infectious. But fortunately for them, it is still susceptible to the vaccine. That's what's called B117, or now what they call them alpha. I'll come just now to the terminology because people get a lot confused with the terminology. The second variant, and that variant is now the predominant strain in North America, in Europe, in Australia, and mainly the kind of developed world. The second variant is what we call the beta variant, and that's our variant. That's a variant which was first discovered in South Africa. It has spread to several countries in Africa, Southern African countries, and some Eastern African countries, one or two Central African countries. Most African countries don't have it as a dominant strain, but Southern African countries like Zimbabwe, Zambia, and so on, this is the dominant strain. 95 to 97% of the viruses are this beta variant. And that's very unfortunate for us. It's very bad luck for us because that particular variant is the most resistant to the vaccine of all the variants. The third variant is what's called the gamma variant, and that gamma variant is found mainly in South America. It's originally detected in Brazil, but it's spread to various other countries around there. So we're not too worried about it. It hasn't really spread very much outside that. And the fourth variant is a worrying one that's called the Delta variant, and that was first isolated in India. Now that variant is the most contagious of all, the most infectious, spreads the most rapidly. It's overtaken the original alpha variant in England, for example. Now what happens with these variants, as they change, as they mutate, they take on a new characteristic. And it can be one of three things. Either they become more contagious, or alternatively, they can cause more severe disease, or thirdly, they can escape the immune system. Our bad luck is the latter, is that ours is both more infectious, probably a bit more serious disease, but definitely more resistant to the vaccine. And therefore, that limits our choices with what vaccines we can use. So these variants, they start off with rather complicated numbers and so on. Now, our variant is called B1.351, or something call them Y501V2 and so on. So a lot of people started getting a bit confused. So the WHO said, let's make it a lot more simple. The first one in England and the developed world is alpha. Second one in Africa and South Africa is beta. The third one in Brazil and South America is gamma. And the one from India now is delta. And it actually goes on, carry on epsilon, chi, and so on, for the variants which are not such problematic. I think eventually they're going to run out of letters of the Greek alphabet. But so far we can focus on those four: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta.
And does that mean, Doc, and maybe the last question on this, is that what's driving that some of this reinfection of COVID, where we thought that we would be immune if we got it once, and people are getting it twice? And even saw a presentation by Discovery that they had 13 or 14 people that have got it 3 times.
3 times, correct. Yeah, exactly that. No, it's actually 2 things. One of them is the variants, because the variants change the code. They change what we call the antigenicity, in other words, the characteristic. So if you had COVID in the first wave, you had COVID with one of the original, what we call ancestral strains or parental strains. The beta variant only came about in the second wave. So if you were infected in the first wave, you're completely susceptible to the beta variant in the second wave. So the variants do play a role, and the beta variant is now our dominant strain in the third wave as well. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that the immunity doesn't last all that long, unfortunately. And it's not complete, it's partially protective. In other words, it does protect against severe disease, but not against more mild disease. And that's why people are getting it second after, even sometimes after the vaccination. We know that a lot of people who've been vaccinated still get the illness, but usually it's very much milder. You see, the main point of the vaccine, what we really want to do is prevent severe disease, because it's severe disease which overloads the hospitals and so on. Mild disease, it was very mild, of course, we can tolerate it. We all get the common cold, for example, the sniffles. That's not too serious. But the vaccine will not be 100% protected by any means.